Hello, Eclectic Crafter here. So, this is my starter. And to be honest, I don't use it as a starter. I use it as a sponge. I need to make hot dog buns. Now you see, it's pretty healthy, but I'm not going to spend 16 to 24 hours waiting for my buns to be ready. I'm not that patient. So I'm going to use it as a sponge. And it works great as a sponge. And today I'm making hot dogs. So it needs a clean container. You know what, first I use milk and I keep it in the fridge. And I don't really measure anything. This is the skim milk I had left over from the butter I made. That's high gluten flour. And I'll just get this mixed in. It's actually easier when you're feeding it. And when you're changing containers to feed it, I mix it all together and then add the other stuff to it into a clean container, and it works out great. And I'm going to save about a half a cup. About a half a cup. There are markings on the side. If I scrape it down, I can see. And I'll get this all mixed in. My last feeding, I used some whole wheat. I will change it up at times. Happened to be what I had on the counter, and I went, you know, we'll just give it a little bit of that. I don't mix the rye in with it. It's only the wheat or my high gluten. And we drink 2% milk in this house. So normally, once I get it started, you know, the first week it's on the counter when I started it. And, you know, I was doing it all the correct way, whatever. And so now it's showing it just above the 1 cup. So I didn't take quite a half a cup off. And that goes back in my fridge. This gets scraped into here. I took it out a couple of hours ago so it could start coming to room temperature, so it wouldn't be quite a shock. It's warmer today. It is, what is today? February 18th, I think. We've got a winter storm warning out for this afternoon. We had a warm front move in. Cold front is coming in. Actually, it should hit here in about an hour. And it'll start off with rain, turn to freezing rain, switch to snow. This is what they're saying. It rarely, for some reason, we seem to be in a spot that it just doesn't get that bad. I tell my husband we live in a bubble. And he wants to move. I said we won't be in a bubble anymore. Let's go to Kentucky and they keep getting slammed. Okay, now I'm one of those horrible people that do not follow a recipe. Go ahead and hate me now. I'm just not. I do it for the videos, usually. But I thought, you know, I keep this in the freezer. It came in a big bag, and I broke it down into jars. I wrote the month, year, and on the front of the jar, you just use you just use an alcohol marker to write on the glass. It has held on that long with me grabbing it in and out. Right now it is really cold. This is a 2 teaspoon measuring spoon. I got one of those cheapy sets that has all the increments, and it comes in really handy for this. A package is 2 1/4, but you remember yeast grows. It feeds off the gluten. Have you ever seen the movie The Thing? Watch the John Carpenter version. It's like that. So I keep it in the freezer and it lasts me a long time. For years I kept it in the refrigerator, but it doesn't last as well, I don't think. It works really well from the freezer. I've noticed this last year that I've been doing it. My stuff, the rising is so much better than it used to be. Okay, I know how many ounces are in this bottle. It's a 12-ounce bottle, down this far. So that's probably 1 1/4 cups. I want about half of it. You can add more. Normally I use powdered milk and warm water. It'll just take longer for it to rise. Gonna move you and it's gonna bounce you. So I will cut this part out so you won't be bounced. Today I'm going to use the KitchenAid. This is an Artisan 5-quart. I'm going to use this instead of Ankerstrom, simply because I'm just making a real soft, hydrated dough, and not a lot. I do not want a lot. So I've put, oh, I'm sorry, that's not working. I hung all these things on the wall and they're in the way. So I've put approximately 1/2 cup of my starter, which is my sponge. This is a 1/2 cup measuring spoon. Works great. And about 2/3 a cup of skim milk. That's 1 cup of flour. 1 1/2. 2. Technically, you know, everybody says, oh, the sugar's got to feed the yeast. The yeast eats it converts the gluten and the carbohydrates in the flour, if I understand the science right. I am not a scientist. It converts into the sugar that it wants to feed on. So you don't have to give it sugar. But the men in my house love the taste of sugar. And I have made bread without salt and it just was lacking. How's that? So this is 1 1/2 teaspoons of finely ground sea salt. I've learned not to use any of that coarse salt that they all go nuts over nowadays, because you end up with a chunk of salt in your mouth. And 1 1/2 of sugar. Won't change the flavor that much, but it does give it a little flavor. It may need more flour, but I'm only going to start with the 2. The sponge automatically adds moisture. So some of the moisture is in there. I have hooks on my door. I should see if I can tilt it up a little and show you. Let's see. Bear with me here. So this is what I did to my cabinet door this last year. Is it showing at all? And I marked them and I put hooks on and all that kind of good stuff, just so I could grab them easier. My Tupperware stuff won't hang on it though. Let's go back down. and lock it. Okay, as you can see, it's very dry. We're going to just speed that up a little. And now I'm going to slowly start adding I know I'm going to end up using probably all of this. I'm dribbling. You definitely don't want to add too much at a time, because just because you think it might need it all doesn't mean it will. Flour is going to slowly absorb the moisture. So even after you think you've got it to the point where you want it, let it sit and rest a few minutes so it can absorb some of that moisture and you can get a better idea if it's at the right level that you want it. I've been making my buns with my bread dough. You know, the egg and milk dough that I make for my men that they seem to like. There's only one problem. The buns are kind of dense and they don't hold up well, so if they don't eat them all right away, and I keep telling them, just use the hamburger buns in your lunch. You can bake a sandwich, use it as a sandwich bun, but they don't. So I end up throwing out 3 or 4 almost every week, because one will fill them up. The last time Nick took 2 hamburger patties because my buns, I'm trying to get them to come out thinner, right? So I really pressed them down. They grew fatter, so they came out like this big around, but thinner in height. I said, well, at least I'm getting there. I want them smaller, almost like their store-bought size. Simply because I don't eat that much. They can eat 2 or 3 if necessary, but I want only 1, and I don't want to have to tear half my bun off. But it was still very filling, and my son just took 2 hamburger patties, stuck it on 1 bun, and he was full the rest of the night. I said, you know, they need to be a little lighter. I'll use a little sponge. It's starting to break up a little better. But this is how I make my bread. A little of this, a little of that. I decide as I go. They like the crumb, the density, the taste of bread with some egg and some milk in it. So that's pretty much all I make anymore. As a matter of fact, my rye bread, I just take out 1/3 the white flour, and so it's 1 cup of rye flour to 2 cups of white, 2.5 to, or 1.5, excuse me, 1.5 cups of white, and then I add a little more if necessary. Some days I do have to go up to almost 2.5. And then it's not very rye tasting. They don't want the seeds in it. Spend all that money on the caraway seeds, and they don't want me putting them in there. Oh well. How about grinding them up? See if that added to the flavor. But see how it's all pulled together. Oh, I have a pan hanging on the wall right there. I can feel like gritty on the inside, so I know it hasn't absorbed it all. So I'm going to let this sit, wash my hands, and let it kind of distribute and absorb some of that moisture in, so I can see how much more I want to add. Okay, so we've let it rest. it's pretty gooey still, so I'm gonna go with that. And now I'm gonna let it knead for 10 minutes. You see how it's still cleaning up the bowl, even though it was sticking to my fingers and was very well hydrated, it's still cleaning the bowl because as it stretches the gluten, it just kind of wraps around itself. I don't know a better way of putting it. It almost becomes its own field. But it's looking good. I'm thinking this might work out. I left the egg out. I just don't want it so dense. We will give this a shot. I will see you when it's ready to be formed. It has been beating. I put it on, believe it or not, even though your KitchenAid only shows 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, you can get it in the middle. My old one, it would just slip. But this new one, I stop it right there on the 3 because KitchenAid's instructions on, I think it was on my Pro, told me not to knead bread any higher than 3, and so at that point in time, I just stopped putting it any higher than 3 for kneading bread. And I didn't read the book when that came with this one, so. So even though it's well hydrated, it doesn't feel as hydrated as it did before because that flour's been, look at it. Oh, I love this. This is so cool. It's like the Blob. I like horror flicks, old horror flicks. The new ones are too over the top for me. I did watch Halloween way back in 78. I think it came out in 78. And HBO was relatively new. And we had it. My brother got it. He thought it was the bomb, man. HBO, you can watch movies on there. And we watched it and then decided to walk up to the party store at like 12 o'clock at night because he was out of cigarettes. He was my older brother. And, well, actually I smoked then too. And I was like 18. But we had passed this corner. They had bushes, really tall bushes. We got so freaked out we took off running. Grown man, he spent 8 years in the Navy. It still spooked him out. Yeah, that movie was a trip when it came out. Your monsters didn't get up and walk away after being shot 6 times, you know? Oh well. Anyways, this is my bread. Isn't it beautiful? Oh my gosh. I could just sit here and handle it. That sounds wrong, doesn't it? Oh well. As I keep saying, I'm a crazy old lady. So we're just going to get it all twisted up. That helps tighten it. And it pulls the bottom together. So you see, just had that one little spot where it was still open. And it's already starting to grow. See, there's air bubbles. Oh, this is why I got rid of my Pro 600. Because I could never get the bowl off the back. And now I've got this one and I have to hit it to get it loose. They work so tight. Now, I'm not being all fancy today. This is just oil. And look how easy it sprays on. So, I'm doing that. I'll put my beautiful ball of dough down in there. Plop. Spray the top of it. I find shortcuts for everything. I guess I'm lazy, huh? And it has a top, but of course I forgot it in the cabinet and I have to move the camera to get it. So I will cover this and I'm going to set it in the oven. It is winter here in Michigan, so it takes absolutely forever on the counter and I don't feel like spending all day. I want to get this all filmed before the other 2 men get home because then there'll be so much noise in the kitchen I can't finish it. So hopefully you'll get to see them all cooked and everything, but if they come home, and that'll be the end of this film. So we'll be back when it's time to shape them. I'm just going to let them rise for 30 minutes this way, just a little bit, just rest more than anything. And then I will work them down, shape them, and put them on a pan on parchment paper for the final rise. It's been 30 minutes. It's got a little bit of a rise to it. Mostly it just was resting. Nice greasy bowl. And that was the lid that was trapped behind the camera. So now I'm gonna just kind of mush it down. I don't need to punch it down because one thing I noticed with my burgers, when I make them, I don't want those really thick buns. I can't open my mouth that big, get it around there. I like a certain ratio of bread to meat. So, as hard as I've been trying to get my hamburger buns, mostly I make hamburger buns, but I told them you're having hot dogs one day this weekend, especially if we're going to be snowed in with them. I love my men to death, but Lord, 4 days trapped with 3 of them might be a bit much for my sanity. You know, I've just used a big knife. Big knife. I'll still have to give them a little shape. I tried. It's cookie cutter, and I have used it for biscuits, and I thought, you know, I'm going to try it for the hamburger bun, see if I can make them come the size I want. Yeah, don't do that. They rose like biscuits straight up, and they wouldn't eat them. I said, I'm not eating my hamburger on a biscuit. It's not a biscuit. All right. These are going to be shaped, so, but it's given me a chance to try to make sure they're going to be a little closer to the same size. I always cut my dough. I just usually use the pastry. It's a big blade on a handle kind of a thing. See, this one's a little thicker, so it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be perfect. And I'm going to plop these puppies back here. And get these shaped up. Doo-doo-doo. See, I flattened it all out for nothing. I still automatically did this. I always do this. I just do. It's like a little miniature loaf of bread. And to make my buns, I know it looks strange, but it helps it to stretch and stay stretched. And no matter how, believe me, this is a high moisture content in here. And it's still coming apart. I have a hard time getting those seams to stay together. I almost want to take egg to it, like do to the top. But I'm not going to. Alright, so I want them kind of uniform. And I want that seam side down. So I'm going to shape them all about like that. And I got out my biggest cake pan so that I'll drape plastic over it for a little more because there is a gap. But this gives it room to rise and helps keep any draft off of them. If I put something heavy, like a towel or something, I've noticed that my bread doesn't rise. It just doesn't get a chance to. So we're gonna get this to try to seal up. Look, I made a dumpling. And I will do all of them stretch. And someone's at the door. Okay, I'm back. That was my mail lady, and I went to grade school with her, with two of her brothers. Used to be big families, and they were Catholics, so it was a really big family. And we've known each other for a long time. My husband's known their family since he was a teenager. So we do tend to chat. She brought packages up, and by the time I came back, the camera had shut off. So what I ended up doing with the rest of these is I just kind of I folded them in on themselves, and then I rolled them to get them longer and work out the air. I'm trying to pop any air bubbles I find. And that seemed to work pretty good for, I just wanted an elongated bun kind of a thing. And of course they draw up, and some of them are a little fatter than others. I'll just stretch it out a little bit. Worst will happen is that one will be a sub bun. So that's the buns. And now they need to sit and rise. I won't egg them up until they're ready to go in the oven. I'm going to cover this loosely. See, it's just kind of flat there. I want it to be able to rise, but not so much air get in. So on the edges, I'll kind of just tap it a little. That's what I do. And I will put this over it to keep the draft off. And I will set my timer and be back in about 40 minutes. Okay, they've risen, and as you can see, some got quite large. It can be a sub bun. Now I'm going to egg them and pop them in the oven with my dinner. So I will give you a little picture of them. I usually cook my bread at a very high temperature. I like 425. I want to make them puff up and be airy inside, and that just what works for me. No matter what temp they say in the recipe, it always seems to overcook if it's lower. But I'm sorry, I started sneezing and couldn't stop. So now I'm all nasally. Well, I'm always all nasally, but I'm worse. The dinner is in at 375, so these will be cooked at 375. I only have one oven. I thought about getting one of those large toaster ovens that I could do the bread in, but I don't really have the space. There's no taking it in and out. For one thing, I got a bad back. For another thing, I don't have any place to put it into so that I could take it out of later. So it is what it is. They will cook with the meatloaf, and I will show you what they look like when they're done. Hopefully you can't hear all that going on in my living room. My husband's very into politics. If I have to, I guess I'll dub this. This is the finished. I check with a thermometer, tiny little hole right there, stick it in, 200 degrees. I know you're done. Aiming for like 195, 200. I got tired of all that. I don't know, it doesn't sound hollow. Okay, thank you so much for joining me today. Bye-bye.